Well, hello and welcome. It is so good to have you all here. I just love when I'm in a room full of alumni. It makes me very happy. I first have to just give a thanks to the people who helped us get here tonight. Isa, if you could raise your hand, our fabulous student worker. Isa is not allowed to ever graduate because she's like the best student worker we've ever had. Jess, my partner in crime in the Office of External Programs and Partnerships. And certainly Seth, thank you, working on that camera back there. And of course, our guest of honor, and we'll talk about her in just a minute. Before I get going, I would love to invite Erin up. I wondered if you just took a big mouthful. I like to do that. Okay, great. To tell us a little bit about the Culture House, Erin graduated in 18. And I remember when I was just saying to him, you came to me for help. I had nothing for you. This guy wanted to do space, design, I don't know. But he's doing it 5 years later, so I'd love to have him tell us a little bit about that.
Priscilla is not giving herself enough credit. But I'm Aaron, graduated in 2018. So if you're wondering what place you're in and why there's tools on the walls and nothing you see in a normal workplace, this is Culture House. We're an urban design nonprofit. We work on creating more accessible, equitable public spaces. We do work all around the area, and our primary work is we'll work with the community to reimagine a vacant storefront as a pop-up community space. So using a lot of those UCD tools, a lot of those human-centered design tools in the work, certainly. This here is kind of our office space where we do a lot of our work and our design and build. And we love hosting events like this here in our space, so really happy to be able to share it with Sally and everyone here today. If you have more questions about what we do, feel free to talk to me afterwards. I'm happy to share more information and answer any questions.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, Erin. So first, a few notes from my colleagues at Olin. I don't know, anyone hiring? If you are, you know where to find us. Love to hear from you. We do currently have a couple of openings left for scope. So if anyone knows someone, a company or yours that might be a good candidate, we would love to hear from you on that also. And then just a little bit of housekeeping. If you're at a fairly new address in Boston, shoot it to me on email if you would. We'd love to keep our records updated so that when we do things like this, we get the right people in the room. That would be awesome. So welcome to Frank Talks. This program's been going for about a year. And for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, welcome. This is our Alumni Speaker Series. In these programs, we feature inspiring alumni who are having impact on society and the world. Every day, they're sharing their experience and expertise as interdisciplinary engineers, leaders, and entrepreneurs who are creating change within their communities and within our world. I'm very excited tonight to introduce Mikell Taylor. First, I have to do a shout out to Sparsh, who said to me, Sally, why don't we do something about robotics in Boston? There are so many of us here. And I was like, yeah. And then Mikell said, I'll do it. And I said, yeah. So here we are. So thank you, Sparsh, for the great idea. Mikell is one of the legendary first alumni from the class of 2006. She has spent 2 decades making useful robots, from a robotic senior prom date to autonomous underwater vehicles to cutting-edge industrial robotic systems. She's done robotics as a consultant for startups and for large companies all over the world. Mikell is currently a principal technical program manager at Amazon Robotics. You might have heard of that place, where she leads the autonomous mobility technology and product development program. And I just have to say, she's kind of killing it. Yay! She's passionate about building robots that are practical, reliable, and good partners for the people that work with and around them. In 2018, Mikell was part of Accomplice VC's Rev4 class, highlighting the top women in the Boston tech community. And I remember this when you were recognized as a woman to watch by Mass High Tech in 2011. Outside of work, she volunteers for various STEM outreach and education initiatives. She helps Olin all the time. She will always take a phone call from one of our students. She just told me she's doing something tomorrow night at Olin in one of our classes. And she holds a BS as an ECE from Olin. With that, I'm very pleased to welcome Mikell Taylor.
Hi. So, yeah, I like robots a lot. Kind of my thing. And one of the things that I like about robotics is that there's a lot to think about. And in particular, because I get to literally work on stuff that's in sci-fi, there's a lot of public perception and assumptions about this field. And thinking, for me, it's very fun to think about how the public perceives it, how the work I do plays into those perceptions, and outside of the sci-fi perceptions, what really can be the implications of the stuff I work on. And so that's what I wanted to talk about tonight, is thinking about the robots I work on, we work on, a bunch of you in the room work on this stuff. I think this is broadly applicable to a lot of other kinds of technology and not just robotics, but I'm gonna keep it to robots tonight because that's what I know. And I want to talk about it with a framing of there's no right answer or wrong answer for, is this a good robot to build, or is this a good application of robotics? Because I don't think there are black and white, right or wrong answers. I don't think there ever are. I think that it's one of those things that, like, what is right for you? And what are you doing if you have concerns? How have you identified your own fears, excitement, whatever, and what are you doing with that? What I'm kind of hoping we can do is I will yammer at all of you for a little bit about what I think, but then I think where this would really get interesting is really making it a discussion. And I don't want to like formalize it with a panel, but I do have a couple of plants that I volunteered in the audience who I think are sort of queued up to talk, but I want it to be an open discussion about how everyone here thinks about their work and the choices that they have made about what to work on, and how they see that playing into kind of the broader conversation about robotics and automation in society. So that's the plan. We're recording the first part. The second part, we're going to stop recording. That was my request to Sally, and she very graciously put up with it, because I think it's a hard conversation to have if you know it's being recorded. And some employers may not enjoy it. So I think it's important that we can talk comfortably and openly, and that's what I'm going for. So yeah, with that, there's one caveat I'm going to make. I am not going to touch the topic of AGI. I will talk about AI in the sense that artificial intelligence has been used in the robotics industry for decades, not in the sense of ChatGPT and the singularity and those things. That's a whole other discussion. I don't want to get into it. Argue with me on Twitter if you want to have that conversation. So for a little bit of more detailed background on what I do and what I have worked on, I got my start in robotics first in high school, worked on a bunch of it in college through kind of research stuff and internships. And then professionally, I've worked on underwater robots at Bluefin Robotics, my first job out of college. Then I was one of the first employees at Rethink Robotics back when it was Heartland, so that was manufacturing robotics. Then I went back to Bluefin. Then I worked on aerial robots, drones of various forms that don't do the things you think drones do. Then worked on manufacturing robots again, and now obviously logistics at Amazon. It's a pretty wide range of things, and each time I've taken a job, I've had to kind of stop and think about what it means to take that job and what it means to work on what I'm working on. And what I thought I would do is kind of start with 3 sort of specific verticals for robotics. Some of them seem kind of obvious about what the public perception of them is and what the sort of knee-jerk reaction to them is about, is this good or is this bad? But then I kind of want to talk about how I see the much more nuanced conversation for each of those verticals, and then we'll go from there. So I think everyone probably agrees the first public perceptions around robots are they're going to take all of our jobs and they're going to rise up and kill us all, right? That's pretty standard. So let's take that first one. They're going to take all of our jobs, right? I currently work on logistics automation, manufacturing and logistics is one of those places that conversation comes up a lot. And there's a couple ways to look at that, right? On one hand, manufacturing and logistics are not intellectually fulfilling jobs, right? You are using a tool all day to do one kind of widget installation. You are moving things from point A to point B. You're walking things around a building. And some people like that kind of job. A lot of people are doing it because they have to and they don't have a choice. So there's definitely a conversation to be had about, are those good jobs to automate? There used to be the 3 Ds that were good for robotics, right? Dull, dirty, and dangerous. And I think a lot of logistics and manufacturing work can fall under that rubric. So there's a lot of people who say, I want to automate these. People shouldn't have to do these jobs. And that inspires a lot of people to work in these fields. I think another part of it is, even if people do like those jobs, right, it does expose you to hazards, right? Lifting heavy things is hazardous. Walking around forklifts, moving pallets around is hazardous. And so the idea that you can take people out of the equation and not expose them to those hazards on a regular basis is also arguably a really good thing. And then if you're a business, obviously, if you don't have to pay people, that's a good thing too, right? There is a cost savings to automation that matters, right? Whether you like it or not in this society. And so there's a lot of drive for it there too. But then you get into that conversation of, well, now if all these robots are doing these jobs, what are the people going to do? And the line that I think has become very common and is supported by research is that at scale, automation, and robotics specifically, doesn't eliminate jobs. It just shifts where those jobs are. It creates new kinds of work in different areas. It opens people up to do the things people are best at and not have to do things that are easily automated. And I think that that's become a pretty common refrain probably over the last decade. And it's not wrong. Like, this is backed by all the industry research. Like, yes, there's usually not a net job loss when an industry begins adopting automation. But I think that the nuance there is that's at scale, right? So like across the population, there's not a net job loss. But the new jobs that are created in logistics and manufacturing do tend to be higher skilled jobs. So the people who are being pushed out of work by automation, by robots that can easily do the things that those people do, are not necessarily skilled enough to take up the new work like maintenance, training, that kind of thing that comes from introduction of robotics. And so there's been a lot of discussion in the industry about, well, it's not that I'm taking jobs, I'm helping to create new kinds of jobs that are better, but then what do you do about that kind of lost generation of employees who can't take advantage of those new jobs? This is going to become a refrain, but one of the things that I like to think about is kind of the whole holistic picture of working in technology, that not everything is solved with technology, right? You can put automation in, you can make the robots, that's fine, but what has to change at a social scale to make that okay? If we want fully automated luxury communism, which is really kind of the ultimate win of robotics, especially in like logistics and manufacturing, right? What do all the people do if survival depends on a 40-hour work week? So to me, what's really interesting about the logistics and automation space is where I feel I have obligations outside of my job to push for social change that supports the difference that automation is making in our economy and in our workforce. I think that then if you look at something like defense, right? Defense maybe has some overlap here, right? Again, the dull, dirty, and dangerous kind of thing. Broadly speaking, in defense, people are putting themselves in danger. It is arguably a good thing to not have people putting themselves in danger, right? And some of these are like pretty clear cut, right? There's a ton of unexploded ordnance underwater in the South Pacific around a whole bunch of islands where like kids playing on the beach are discovering unexploded ordnance that can very severely injure them. If your option is to have people on a hydrographic survey ship surveying over a bunch of unexploded ordnance to look for it and therefore find it, diffuse it, all of that sort of thing, is it not obviously better to use a robot to go look for that and figure it out and keep the people out of harm's way until they absolutely have to go in? I think that's pretty cut and dry, right? And that is a defense application of robotics. But then that same technology can be used to, plan out a naval invasion, right? So there's this kind of dual use problem in defense where even if you can say, yes, this is obviously a good thing, right? This is a net benefit to humanity that we have robots doing this work, right? There's always that, oh, but you could use it for this other thing. I think one of the other things in defense that's interesting is the way that robotics can it removes people from the equation in the sense that they don't necessarily have a personal stake. So again, it's great that, if you can set in a packbot or a drone to do surveillance so that a person doesn't have to put themselves in danger, that's fantastic. When you start talking about predator drones, right, where you're basically remote piloting weaponry, that becomes a different equation. If there's no personal stake in what can be a deadly engagement, does that change the decision making? Does that change the willingness to engage? Like all of the rules that we've kind of dealt with humanity for a very long time, how does it change those rules and the way that we think about it as people and what is at stake? And I think that there's, again, not a technological solution here, right? And you can't stop the automation from being developed, but you can influence how it's being used and what conversations are being had about how it's being used. And again, it's that like, what else can I do outside of my job that addresses discomfort I might have with something I work on being used this way? This also kind of, not just the sort of decision-making thing and like divorcing people from the consequences of decisions they might make. I think there's also a situational awareness question, right? When a person is there, they will see, hear, smell, feel very different information than they can get over remote sensors. And again, that's one of the big benefits of robotics, right? I want to go collect this information without putting myself in harm's way, but you're not going to get the same information that you would with your 5 senses. And so by doing that, again, you have less information. Do you have sufficient information to make a really important decision? How do you know you have sufficient information? What are you missing? And so I've worked in defense, right? And I come from a family of, people who served in the military and all of that. So, I have my own comfort level with it. But when I talk to people who maybe feel iffy about working in that sector, especially because that sector funds a lot of fundamental research and development in robotics, always has, I understand their discomfort, and it's important, I think, for people to walk through their discomfort and understand exactly where that lies and figure out, is it not for them, or is it for them, but they feel obligated to take some other action to kind of mitigate the risk of working in that sector. There's a third sector I'll talk about. I don't have personal experience in this one, but it's one of the things I just like to noodle on when I read about this stuff, which is elder care and healthcare robotics. And what's really interesting to me about this, right, is like defense, right? You can say, like, oh, everyone's like afraid robots are going to kill us all. Like military robots, scary, bad, right? Logistics and manufacturing, they're going to take all of our jobs, scary, bad. You get to talking about like elder care and healthcare, and people are like, oh no, but that's good, right? That's like obviously good, right? There's nothing bad there. But I think that's really interesting because there is actually some weird implications to healthcare robotics and elder care robotics, right? So for example, one of the kind of elder care robots that's been around for years that always comes up when people write articles about it is the Paro baby seal. It's this adorable little white baby seal, and it like makes cute little sounds, and it moves and it blinks its very cute eyes, and it's meant to be this kind of like lap pet companion for elderly people, to kind of give them a sense of comfort and companionship. And you look at that like, oh, that's really good and all of that. And when I'm feeling cynical, which I do sometimes, thanks, John. I heard that. Isn't it a little bit weird that we're choosing to automate this extremely human connection instead of automating other things to free up people to have the time and energy to make those connections, right? I just, there's something a little bit dystopian about the Paro robot to me. And I think that this extends to some other areas of kind of elder care and healthcare. Like one very real problem is physically moving people who can't move themselves, and especially elderly people. If they've fallen and they need help getting up, if they need to be moved from a bed or assisted to the bathroom or something, it is dangerous for the healthcare worker and dangerous for the person to be moved by a person, right? So, of course, it's an obviously good thing for a robot to move them instead of a person. But at the same time, if you think about how much information a healthcare worker can get being in close physical proximity to a patient, right? To feel their weight, to understand, are there sensitive parts of their body that they're suddenly favoring or reacting to? are there changes in the way their breath smells or their skin feels? I think there's a lot of information gathered in those interactions that if we simply say, it is obviously a net good to automate all of this with robots, may get missed and may result in very different healthcare interactions with people who need close attention and need like almost diagnostic interaction with other humans. So those are areas where, I think the kind of societal knee-jerk reaction is very positive, but there are actually kind of some unintended consequences to it that I think people tend not to consider. And then the last one in healthcare I'll point at, I think we've got intuitive surgical people in here. Yes? No? I chatted to a couple. Maybe not. Robotic surgery. There's intuitive is one of them. There's a bunch of others. Robotic surgery, less invasive, more precise. Obviously a net good to society, right? Nothing to be concerned about there. Except that there's a researcher on automation who's really interesting. His name is Matt Beam. He's at UC Santa Barbara. He's lovely. Look him up. He's done a bunch of research that shows that robotic surgery technology is making for worse surgeons, like less skilled surgeons, because of how the training happens, right? If you have manual surgery, which I think is non-robotic surgery, right? A surgeon who's training another surgeon can kind of hand off work fluidly back and forth with somebody who's in training. With a robotic surgery interface, you kind of just have to be in that seat and you can't like stand up, let the other person come in, get their situational awareness, back off, because you're looking into this like, eyepiece, right? So the other person doesn't have the same situational awareness that you do to kind of hand off seamlessly. And so what that means is trainee surgeons are learning through simulators and through watching on a screen instead of actually being fully hands-on with real surgery the way they used to. And that's resulting in newer surgeons being unable to cope if the robotic process breaks down. They don't have the experience to correct mistakes manually, which is leading to some worse health outcomes in some areas. And so again, the answer here is not necessarily purely technological, right? It's not necessarily, well, stop making robotic surgery devices or don't use this technology, right? It's rethinking the way that we do medical training, the way that we teach people and apprentice people to do certain jobs. And the reason I wanted to bring all these up, like I said, is, I think most people assume working in this space in robotics is always going to be a good and positive thing without really thinking about it and contrasting that with the stuff where the knee-jerk reaction is often, oh, this is like terrible, it's dangerous, it's the things sci-fi warned us about. Just like that can have unexpectedly good influence, the good stuff can have unexpectedly bad influence. So these are the kinds of things that I think about when I'm bored. There's your insight into my brain. I kind of want to sort of start the bigger discussion now. Before we turn off cameras, do people have specific questions or things they want to throw out there on these sort of vague, general, high-level topics? Bueller? All right.
Well, I have to say, thank you so much, Michael. This was fantastic. And thank you to all of you who've joined us tonight. This has been a really awesome segment of Frank Talks. Have a good night.